Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to another Down the Donut Hole podcast, and with the full crew back.
Yes,
maybe not 100%, but you're
but
doing
not
better.
The full crew. We're still missing Des. He is AOL.
He's out there,
and he is taking care of our house,
the production,
and he's doing production and things like that. But our schedules are really not dovetailed very well, because there's 6 hours difference between where we are and where he is.
Well, that's a benefit for us.
Oh, it is.
We're actually getting them out earlier.
Our podcast, yeah, we are. Because it's 6 a.m. for him when it's noon for us. And so that gives us all of those hours to put something together. I have to apologize today, because I really was going to suggest that maybe we go down to the grotto today and see if we can find that cave and all of that. But I did not sleep well last night. And so I'm starting to sound like an old lady. Oh, my goodness. Not just the raspy voice, but also talking about my health and how I've been sleeping. And
like I say, you got two ways you can go with that. You can be old lady or you can be ASMR. Well, I would choose the latter if I were you.
Yeah, well, I'm not very skilled at that sort of thing. Anyway, I thought we would go hunting for that, maybe take the sound equipment down there, but I'm still not feeling up for that. And I think there's a point where if you push it too much, and I am doing a lot better, doing a lot more things than I was there for a few days, I think you can set yourself back. So I had plans for tomorrow maybe to go to one of the marchés, which I dearly love.
Yeah. I'll play it as it goes, at the moment.
Yes. In order to go to that marché, though, you and I have to get up very early in the morning and walk to the bus.
It seems like that's not been a problem lately. That's, that is a problem, and it's not. If you want to get out early, then that works well.
Yeah, well, maybe we should lean into that a little bit.
Maybe so. You're sounding better, though. You're still taking your herbs?
Yes. Yes, I am. I still am using the thyme and the honey. Right now, I have a nice hot cup of Earl Grey tea with a glob of honey in there, and it does feel really good on my throat. My voice is getting better every day. We have some voiceover work to do that has been pushed back on the calendar because of my voice. Who knew? It's like, if I had a bad arm or a bad foot or a stomach ache or something, I probably could get that stuff done and out. But it's like I get struck in my most vulnerable point, my big mouth. And so all of that stuff has been pushed back. But hopefully, hopefully, maybe as early as tonight, I can get some of it done.
We call you the folklorist, but you're also a bit of an herbologist. And I've made a study of that.
Well, I have, but informally. And over the years, I've had lots of gardens. One of my favorite things to do, both here and when we were in the States, is to go around and try to find native plants, especially herbs, or flowering plants that just look pretty, that can live in the environment without a great deal of care. Then I collect those plants and try to plant them in the borders around the house so that they will turn into what looks like a nice garden with pretty flowers and useful plants, but require almost zero work from me.
What's different about the environment around here, would you say, that it causes so many, naturally just wild growing herbs, unusually so?
Well, I think here we have certainly the difference in soil. A lot of the soil where we are is quite volcanic because we are on the side of an extinct volcano, which is wonderful for us because we get a lot of mountain breezes that cool the air temperature while the ground remains quite warm. And that's important. That's one of the things I was talking about before I got sick, or maybe it was after, I've lost track of time. But with the roofs, it's like brick red with a hint of purple soil, and they're rolling flutes, ruffles. Think ruffles, because that's really what roofs means. It doesn't mean like ceiling roofs, it means ruffles. And those, if you want to explore those, which I have never had a desire to do, frankly, you have to do it very early in the morning before it gets hot because they retain the heat. like a brick oven would. And so it's an interesting terrain, the way they roll, and I'm not talking huge. I'm talking, I don't know how big they are, but they're not
Yeah,
a
it varies.
lot. But they're very slippery and very hot. And nothing grows on those because it's so hot. But around them, the vines do wonderfully well. Now, where we are literally is in the middle of an organic vineyard. And it's wonderful to watch day after day. I mean, you can literally see the vines growing and becoming healthier and healthier, which is delightful to see. I think we've had rain twice since we've been here. One good rainstorm that was notable, along with some thunder, which I quite like, because the place that we stay is old and the walls are thick and you feel very protected. And so that's kind of a pleasure to listen to the storm do its thing outside, and you're tucked in your bed or sitting on a sofa, paging through a book, or I like paging through cookbooks. And it's a very nice feeling. Here, watching the vines expand and grow and become healthier and the leaves get bigger and bigger is a delight. But around them, too, the rosemary grows wild here. And there are several really big plants of it. And I like to go out and snip some for whatever I'm cooking for supper because it's a flavor you just never tire of. And I think that there's a certain versatility to rosemary that a lot of other herbs I can't say that same thing about, where you don't really get tired of it. Tonight I'm thinking about making like a frittata, and I'll put some rosemary in there, and that'll taste really nice. I have some sausage to add to that, and I'll use some eggs and some Comte cheese, and that's always beautiful. And I keep salads, what I call mason jar salads. I keep those done up so that then I always have a side dish. Because late afternoon, after we've gone on one of our adventures or worked on a project, we do quite a lot of work here, writing, some announcing, voiceover work, that sort of thing. At the end of the day, I'm just tired. I just want a hot meal that's easy to clean up after. As I've said before, it isn't the cooking that I don't enjoy very much late in the day. I love to cook, and especially with all the wild ingredients that I can find here. It's the cleanup that I don't enjoy. After I've sat down to a nice meal, I just want to continue sitting down.
Do you know if the culinary herbs are also all medicinal, or are some one or the other?
A lot of them are. A lot of the old herbals, one of the things that's fascinating about those, I'm talking about Culpepper's and John Gerard's herbal and a number of other ones. M. Grieve did one in the 20th century. Actually, hers was a 2-volume set. A few other ones that I use regularly. Rodale. Do you remember the Rodale herbal in the 70s?
Yeah, the press and all the books they put out, yeah.
Rodale had that. And there were also herb sections, if I remember right, in Mother Earth News in the 70s. I predict that you're going to see more and more of that kind of thing, a resurgence, because people are afraid right now. Everybody's worried that we're on the precipice of some apocalyptic thing. And understanding wild herbs and the medicinal uses of those. Now, for me, it's an adventure here, and I can recognize easily the culinary ones. The thyme, the rosemary, marjoram grows wild here out in the grass, which is, again, kind of nice because your footfall releases these tasty aromas. But back in the States, I know a lot about medicinal plants. There's tall malayan, hairy malayan, it's called, verbascum, I believe is the correct scientific name. And that's a particularly interesting herb. I found it regularly and reliably along railroad tracks. where they've kept that clear over the years. And it grows in dry, kind of chinky soil. And it's a very bright green, hairy, but not prickly so, rosette that grows on the ground. And then from that grows a tall stalk, sometimes as high as me, over 5 feet, over, 5.5 feet, something like that, sometimes taller, with a yellow cone on top. And that herb, you can take that back home, pick it gently. Never, ever, if you're out sampling herbs or learning about wild herbs, never take the last ones. Take a healthy sample, but keep a good eye from your vantage point where you're standing to make sure that there are plenty of that type growing around you, because you want it to reseed. Reseed, I don't mean R-E-C-E-D-E, I mean reseed, S-E-E-D.
Okay.
So you want it to replenish itself so that if you come back to the same place next year, you will be able to find those herbs again.
So that would be an example of a medicinal versus culinary, right?
That's medicinal.
Yeah.
You can take and soak that in olive oil. Usually and I have done this, use it, warm the olive oil, bruise the leaves of the plant. I always wash them, but gently, kind of with a damp cloth. Just get any surface dirt out of there, make sure there's no bugs. And then bruise the leaf, kind of crush it a little bit, put it in the warm oil, let it steep for a couple of days. Sometimes if it doesn't look or smell like anything is happening, you might want to rewarm the oil gently, not boil it, but bring it back to warm and continue steeping that. Then you can take a dropper and put a few drops of the hairy Malayan oil in your ears. And it's excellent for earaches and any, sometimes if you have ringing in your ear, or you think maybe you need to loosen earwax or something else that's gotten in your ear, that's superb for that. Another one that just goes wild in the States is what's called son before the father. Have you ever heard of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have.
Colt's foot. Now,
okay, yeah, that's right.
Why it's called son before the father is because it's one of the first plants up in the spring. It's probably available now along the hedgerows, along roads. A lot of these herbs seem to have seeded themselves beside roadsides or paths in the wild. In this, son before the father or colt's foot can be identified. And I will say, I'll take a break here and say, I recommend that you get a really good manual on wildflowers. I prefer the ones that have photographs rather than line drawings, but the combination of the two is fantastic when you're out learning about herbs, which is how I did it when I was young, high school age. I used to like to go out and I would take samples of herbs, bring them home. I didn't have a big library about that sort of thing back then, but I'd look them up. And remember, back in our day, we did not have the internet. So having a library was how you did it. I could go to the library, and sometimes I did, but that was harder for me, than just buying books when I got a chance.
Magazines, like you said, Mother Earth News being one of them.
And a lot of those, Herb Weekly and some of those other things, I'd save my money up and get them. And magazines at that time had a lot of advertisements in the back. And so a lot of the early herbals that I bought, modern herbals, or reprints of the ancient ones, were from the backs of magazines, ads that I sent away for. And so you'd write out your order and mail that in. It was a lot slower than it is now. But we didn't know any better. I was happy for that. I thought
that's all we had.
It was all we had. And here we go, sounding old again. But the son before the father, the coltsfoot, if you spread out a leaf of coltsfoot, it's shaped like a horse's hoof. You use your imagination a little bit because some of it comes to points. It's completely perfectly rounded like a horse's hoof would be. It kind of has maybe points, and then it continues a slight arc and then another arc until you get that arched shape that you imagine a horse's hoof would have. And so that's one way that you can tell that it is coltsfoot. The other way is that it has bright yellow flowers that it puts up. Now get this, before the hoof-shaped leaf. So as you're going along a path, you see these what look like dandelions, frankly, but if you go over closer, there's little nubs along the stem. The stem is not unlike a dandelion, less mucilage in it, but still sort of that way. It's about the same height. The yellow blossoms are about the same, maybe a little smaller than the average dandelion button shape, but it has these little nubs on the side of the stem. But those are superb. You can grow those and or go collect them. Usually when you see one plant, you'll find quite a lot in the same area. Again, if you have been conscientious, and other collectors, foragers, have also been conscientious, it will grow back next year. And the trick is, again, cut the leaves, cut the flowers, but do not pull up the root, or don't take so many that it can't come back, that it will die. So that's really a good rule of thumb for any kind of foraging that anybody does, or for anything that you do in life. Don't deplete your source. Don't take and take and take and take. Be conscious of what you take. Cut, be careful how you take the leaves. Don't just tear at them so that you do damage to the plant. There are those who say you should always have gratitude in your heart when you take something from a plant.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. What about the ones where the root is the thing that you eat?
Usually those kinds, like dandelion, that's one of the things that is useful about a dandelion, is useful. I've never got it that people are so disdainful of dandelions just because they want a smooth lawn. To me, when you understand the benefits of the plant, there are so many usage for dandelions.
Pretty much the whole plant, right?
Absolutely. Now, the root can be made into like a coffee. However,
I love it.
Anything pertaining to dandelions, from the blossoms, the leaves, I use all of it. But anything pertaining to dandelion has the effect of stimulating the production of urine. And so the French name for dandelion is, and literally, this is what it is, pis en lit, which means piss the bed or pee the bed. And that is an accurate description of one of the medicinal benefits of the dandelion plant.
I'm sure the doctors prescribe that every time that they need a diuretic, right?
Well, they would be well served to do that, and the public would be well served to understand.
I'll tell you, I've been given diuretics before for whatever, and with nasty side effects. And, this has a natural product of the earth, right? And it does the same thing and more efficiently.
It does. But I will caution people, and then I have to finish my thought about the coltsfoot. The coltsfoot, you can dry the leaves, smoke them, inhale the smoke for a sore throat or to clear nasal passages. And so that's an extremely useful plant. The yellow flowers that look
now you're talking about smoking herbs. I don't know if you want to cross over there.
No, it's... I'm not saying that for people to do it recreationally or to think that, hey, this is a get out of jail free card. I can smoke whatever I want. No, you have to respect the plant and the power of the plant. And if you do, you'll be safe in your usage of it. You'll be safe. You won't create havoc in an ecosystem. And you will take benefit from it, but you have to respect it. And if you respect that plant and use it wisely, it will help you. It will respect you. But like anything else, if you abuse it, you can cause yourself a great deal of trouble. And so the yellow flowers from the coltsfoot, you can take and boil those, make a very thick tea, add a lot of sugar, and make what is essentially cough drops out of that. You let it thicken, cook down, spread it on maybe parchment paper or something like that. Wax paper is how we used to do it. And that way you can take those. They're sticky. They're not nice to put in your purse or take with you when you go to work. So that might be something you want to just leave home and in a protected tin or something like that so that you're not inviting ants. Or in the fridge, keep it cool so it doesn't revert back to a syrupy liquid. Or just leave it like syrupy liquid and take it like cough medicine. Like a liquid cough medicine for chesty coughs. So we have the hairy Malayan, we have the coltsfoot, we have dandelion. Now the flowers of dandelion can be used in the same way. I have always made dandelion wine out of that. Now dandelion wine was traditionally collected, I believe, on St. George's Day in Europe, certainly in the UK. I believe that's the truth.
St. George and the Dentillon.
Yes, in April.
Which means what in French?
The dragon?
No.
What?
That's where the word dandelion comes from. It's actually French, and it means the tooth of the lion.
Oh, I didn't.
Dent de lion.
And that would be a reference to the sharp zigzags on the leaf. The dandelion blossoms, you pull the little yellow part off. You steep those in warm water, make a tea. And then from there, you use that as the liquid to begin making wine. And that dandelion wine was considered Christmas wine. So you made it at the end of April. That gave it plenty of time to mature so that it was a nice little toasting drink for the Christmas holidays, for the Yuletide holidays. And another reason why that was particularly welcome during the Yuletide holidays is because the head of a dandelion reminds people of a sunshine. It's so nice and bright and yellow and round, like a little solar disk. And so it was like having a little tribute to sunshine.
So what do you use the flower for?
You pull the little flower pistils off there, all the yellow parts. Don't use the green, although I have. But it changes the color of the finished product of the wine. You have to compensate for that in ways. And I have some secrets that I do to be able to override the greenish tint that it gives your dandelion wine. So for me, one of the best places to collect my dandelions over many years was, this sounds creepy again, but at the cemetery.
Oh, so there you go again.
I talked to the director, the groundskeepers of the cemetery, and I says, I have to make sure that you're not using insecticides or herbicides here. And if you're not, would it be okay if I pick dandelions? And boy, were they happy to see me. They said, absolutely, we would love to have you pick dandelions. So I would go and I would take the youngest of my grandkids with me, because if you ask a little kid to pick a flower, they usually just rip the head off, which is all I really wanted for that. And so we would pick a lot, a gallon or two of just the flower heads.
Yeah, but you got the leaves too at the same time, didn't you, for salad?
Well, I usually didn't in the same collection, Dave. The reason I didn't is because it's important. If you're going to do dandelion wine, you need a lot of those heads, particularly if you're going to discard the little cup that the yellow fluffy part grows in. And if I'm there with a little kid, I don't want to confuse the issue. I can go back, and I did. Almost every day I would go over the same place and collect a whole bunch of different greens, with the bulk of the ones that I collected being the dandelion greens. Oh, they make a wonderful salad. I love it. I love the dense green of it. And with all the other herbs, heal all. I used to get sheep sorrel, many different types of herbs. The little oxalis leaves, lots of them. Clover, Queen Anne's lace. Not yarrows so much. I would collect yarrows, but I wouldn't use those in my salad because they taste very medicinal. That's another herb that's extremely good against chest colds, head colds, that kind of thing. And you do it the same way. It's the leaves you want from the yarrow blossoms, from the yarrow plant. And they're very feathery, is a good way to put it. And so you collect the feathery leaves from the yarrow plant, bring it home, rinse them off, and then I steep them just like you would drop a tea bag in hot boiling water. You can do the same thing. However, for me with the wild herbs, because if what I'm after is a medicinal quality, I sort of overdo it a little bit. Instead of just dropping it in for the, 2 to 4 minutes that you would normally steep a tea bag to make a proper cup of tea. You don't leave it in there for longer than that because commercial tea, Camellia sinensis, which is regular tea, like black tea, that gets bitter after that. Some people can push it to 5 minutes, maybe 6 if you like bitterness, but after that it's too bitter. It's good for plants, but it's not as tasty for drinking. And so with the herbs, however, I will steep longer. And then if it has cooled somewhat, then I just bring it quick back to quite hot. Add your honey. I use agave sometimes if I don't have honey on hand. And honey has gotten extremely expensive, and I don't keep bees. So, I'll just use the agave, and it gives you that slick effect, and it's very useful. Yarrow is a plant you can transplant into your garden. It has a hardy rootstock. Queen Anne's lace is one you can transplant into your garden. Now, Queen Anne's lace is actually wild carrot. And so if you come across Queen Anne's lace, now I will say a word of caution. The yarrow plant and the Queen Anne's lace look a lot alike. You'll tell the difference because the Queen Anne's lace, if you bruise the feathery leaves, which are not as dry feeling as the yarrow leaves, if you bruise those leaves, they give off the scent of wild carrot, which is exactly what Queen Anne's lace is. They're both umbelliferous, which means they have spreading tops to them made up of a lot of little teeny flowers, but a lot of them that spread out kind of like an umbrella. That's where the word umbelliferous comes from. So, but you have to be careful with those because there are other plants that can be dangerous. You have to know what you're picking. Hemlocks kind of are umbelliferous like that, and there's a number of other ones. Hogweeds have sort of that shape, but they're big, 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 big. Stay away from anything like that because that can cause you severe skin reactions to the tune of burns, physical, chemical burns on your skin that will take a very long, painful while to heal. So know what you're doing, get yourself a good book, or go with somebody who's experienced in things like that. One of my sons, I've gone for years harvesting things with him, and he's as interested as I am. However, he has a lot less at his stage of life time to go out there. And I don't mean THYME. I mean just literally tick-tock time to get out there and
Most of my life I went along with a misconception about sumac. I think I always heard poison sumac, and I assumed that you had to stay away from it. But the red conical, what do you call it, buds?
I call them cones.
Cones or whatever. And I thought, well, that's got to be what's poisonous. It looks kind of, dangerous somehow. But indeed, you can make a drink out of those.
They are lovely. They're very lemony. A lot of India cooking makes use of sumac. And it's a lovely ingredient because it has the effect of giving a sauce more of a silky feel instead of a watery feel. It also imparts a beautiful ruby color to things. But this drink that Dave is describing, you collect the red drupes or cones from sumac, and they grow on bushes. And again, be careful. You don't want to disturb the trees or damage the trees. I'll tell you something else about those, which is kind of interesting. Those cones, I use the commercial jars that you can buy pickles in, the big tall ones. I'm not talking about the ones that fit on the shelves generally at the grocery store. I'm talking about the ones that maybe a commercial restaurant or sub shop or something like that might buy, the gallon jars of pickles. It is well worth buying those every once in a while, because if you were to try to buy that size jar, it's going to cost you way more than the gallon of pickles will. And so if you want the jar like tomorrow, let's say you're going on a big picnic and you want something with a nice tight lid that you can keep cold, those are just the ticket, because they use vertical space in your refrigerator, something you've heard me talk about before, because it's very efficient to employ that rather than stacking two shorter bowls. It's better to have one big one, and then you can see exactly what's in it. You take the label off, you run boiling water, boil that up, clean the lid, prepare it for use, secondary use. I sometimes have taken the pickles out. Some of them I chop up and make a dill relish. I do that right away. And I put that in a regular size jar, a pint-sized jar. Then that's ready to add to salads or to put on sandwiches or burgers or anything like that. So we've used a few of the pickles from the gallon jar that I want so badly, that I covet. And I take some and I cut them into slices for, again, on burgers or something like that. And then, just have those on hand. In a million ways, they're handy, because if you serve somebody sandwiches and maybe potato chips or a little salad on the side, add a couple of slices of pickles, and it just elevates the whole plate. It just makes it nicer. And so I kind of do up a few of those because it makes it easier for me, just in a pinch when I come out in the kitchen and I'm in a hurry or whatever. It's one less thing I have to think about doing, but the reward is pretty big. Plus, when I have that jar, there's so many uses. So for this sumac drink, which tastes like kind of lemony, like pink lemonade, and it looks a lot like pink lemonade.
Yeah, strawberry lemonade a little bit.
Yeah. You take your sumac cones, rinse them quickly in fresh water, make sure there's no bugs on them or anything like that. Then you submerge them, put them in one of those big jars, those big gallon X pickle jars, and cover it with cool water. I never use warm water, even though the extraction process would be quicker. I don't do it because I think it gives a fresher, brighter flavor if you take your time with that. Like solar tea is really kind of what I'm thinking.
Okay. So is there any part of that that's poisonous? Now we know that the red cones are okay, but where did I get this poison sumac thing from?
I think that there's another whole variety of sumac, or something that's called sumac, that may cause some skin irritations. And again, who knows whether people are allergic or not. That's why when I say handle these things carefully, and don't just bring home a whole bunch of stuff and then pig out on it. You don't. You treat it with respect. Now, for instance, any of those things that we talked about, my advice to people is test it, bring it home. If you want to do a skin test, you can take a Band-Aid, put one of the leaves under a Band-Aid and tape it to your arm, the inner part of your arm.
You can also just rub a leaf, kind of vigorously on your skin, so it doesn't break the skin or anything, but it's usually enough for you to show a reaction if you're highly allergic, at least.
Yeah. And so I think that's important to do. With the sumac the next day, after it has steeped in the cool water, like solar tea, you're going to add sugar to that. Usually, I take some of, before, I don't fill my jar completely. I take some cold water and make like a syrup with sugar, and then I add that the second day, but after it's cooled. I don't do it, immediately after making the syrup, so that you sweeten it just a little bit. But I like the tanginess of it, so I'm not, overly generous.
What about agave, like you were saying? Can you use that instead of sugar?
You could. I prefer the white sugar to the honey-colored agave, simply because I think that the ruby color of the sumac is preserved more if you just use syrup from white sugar that you made. And again, I don't use a lot, just enough so that it's not too acidic, so that it has more of a lemonade kind of flavor to it. And that is truly delightful on a summer's day. And it's also something different. So if you want to have something special for guests, let's say, that are coming to your house, if you make up a couple jars of that ahead of time and then decant it in a pretty pitcher of some sort, clear glass, so that you can see the pretty color. And I always strain it. If I pour it into a pitcher, you want to strain it, because the cones have little bits of the cones sometimes will come off, and a lot of people don't like stuff floating in their drink, especially things that they're unfamiliar with. So for me, I know what it is, and you know what it is. But for guests, you want it as like a familiar drink.
You strain that, though, right?
Just strain it when you pour it from the pickle jar into a pretty pitcher. Just run it through a strainer, kind of a fine mesh strainer, so that the presentation is really nice. Add some ice to that.
And in case you missed a bug or something, it would be
embarrassing. Yeah,
it really would. You can always say, extra protein, but I don't think people buy that so much.
No. I also like to add a little sprig of mint, wild mint. So that's always fun to look for along stream beds. And we
used to choose something that we called sour grass. We found out, in fields or wherever, and it was really tangy, and it had a nice acidic effect to it and some flavor. I don't know if it was really supposed to be edible, or as far as I know, nobody dropped over.
Was it like a little tiny clover, 3-leaf clover?
No, not a clover.
Is that what you called it?
No, it's like a grass. There was no other bud or flower to it. It was just you could tell the difference when you saw it. Mm. And you pick it and chew on it. It was like, kind of a little treat.
In the mountains you found this?
Catskills mainly, yeah, I think.
Yeah, because that would not be familiar with me. But, there's so many things out there. And it's just such a wonderful time to go and learn about them. Take your time. You're outdoors. It feels magnificent to be out there. You're satisfying curiosity. You're also giving yourself an education that can be very useful. Like I say, the thyme tea with the honey has helped me greatly. And there was something more than just the medicinal qualities of the tea itself. Part of it was knowing that I went out and picked it in the wild and brought it back. And there's a certain pleasure in all of that I highly recommend for, health-giving purposes to the spirit as well as the body. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dave, we're almost out of time.
Oh, you mean THYME?
No.
We better go pick some then.
Yeah, I'm out of here. Anyway, have a great day. Get outside. Maybe investigate some of the weeds in your yard. Don't use weed killers, because you're killing your medicine chest out there. I
always wanted to yell at the guy who came around with a lawnmower once in a while before we had a chance to harvest our dandelions and all that stuff. Don't cut the food. Don't kill the food.
Well, one thing is for sure with the dandelions, they'll be back and better than ever. And they're especially good right after they come back. Cutting them down is not a terrible thing because when they come back, they're softer. And ideally, you don't want the great big long leaves unless they've grown in the shade and are very soft and pliable, not rubbery, or they get a little hard. In the bugs, toward the end of summer, bugs like to feast on all of that stuff. So after the lawnmower has gone around, you know where the dandelions grow. Just go back out a couple of days later and harvest them when they're 2 or 3 inches long and pliable and brand new. So they can't kill them. Anyway, have a great day. Count your blessings. We'll talk tomorrow.